The smell of caramelized onions and seared meat filled the kitchen as I put the finishing touches on my signature dish. 25 candles waited on the counter, still in their box, while my parents' voices drifted in from the dining room, cooing over Sophie's latest achievement. Always Sophie. "Riley, is dinner almost ready?" Mom called out. "Sophie has that interview tomorrow morning, remember?" I gritted my teeth, carefully plating the braised short ribs. 5 more minutes. The sauce needed to be perfect. A reduction of red wine, beef stock, and fresh herbs I'd been perfecting for months at the restaurant. Mason appeared at my side, sliding a pristine white plate onto the counter. "Need help carrying these out?" "I've got it." The words came out sharper than intended. "Sorry, just, you know how they get. That's why I'm here, moral support and all that." He squeezed my shoulder, but quickly stepped back as Sophie breezed into the kitchen. "Something smells burnt," she announced, wrinkling her nose. Her perfectly manicured fingers traced along the counter's edge. "Did you remember Dad's acid reflux? He can't handle spicy food anymore." "It's not spicy, Sophie. I know how to cook for my own family." She smiled, that sugary smile that never reached her eyes. "Just looking out for everyone, like always." I carried the plates out one by one, arranging them carefully around the table. Dad barely looked up from his phone, while Mom fussed with Sophie's hair, asking about interview outfits. The candles remained unlit in their box. "Before we eat," I said, standing beside my chair, "I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. This recipe is something I've been working on." "Oh, honey, let's just eat while it's hot," Mom interrupted. "Sophie needs her rest for tomorrow." I sank into my chair, watching as they took their first bites. The meat should have been fork tender, falling apart with minimal effort. Instead, Sophie made a show of sawing at hers with her knife. "It's chewy," she said, setting down her fork, "and really salty. Did you taste this before serving?" Dad pushed his plate away. "It is rather tough. Maybe stick to simpler dishes next time, Riley." "That's impossible," I muttered, cutting into my own portion. The meat yielded easily, perfectly cooked. I tested this recipe dozens of times. Sophie took a long sip of water. "Well, clearly something went wrong tonight. It happens to everyone, right? Not all of us can be professional chefs." "Try it," I said to Mason, who had been quietly eating beside me. "Tell them." He cleared his throat. "It's actually perfectly—" "Oh!" Sophie suddenly grabbed her throat, face contorting. "Something's wrong. It burns." Mom jumped up, rushing to Sophie's side as she continued to gasp and cough. "What did you put in this, Riley?" "Nothing. I swear it's just—" "Call an ambulance," Dad shouted, already dialing his phone. I stood frozen, watching the chaos unfold. Sophie's performance was Oscar-worthy. The trembling hands, the tears streaming down her face. But when our eyes met across the table, I caught the flash of triumph in her expression. Mason's hand found mine under the table. "Riley, we should go." "No." I yanked my hand away, fury rising like bile in my throat. I want to know what she did to my food. But nobody was listening. They never did. Mom and Dad huddled around Sophie, who had mysteriously recovered enough to scroll through her phone while they debated which emergency room to visit. I walked into the kitchen, past the box of unlit candles, and opened the trash can. There, beneath some paper towels, lay an empty bottle of hot sauce, Sophie's favorite brand, the kind that could make grown men cry. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about ruining my birthday dinner. This was about making sure I never forgot my place in this family. Well, if Sophie wanted to play games, I could play too, and I played to win. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, letting the trash can lid slam shut. The executive chef position at Maison Rouge felt like a lifeline thrown into choppy waters. I stared at the offer letter, my hands trembling slightly as I read it for the 10th time. "You earned this," Mason said, leaning against the prep station. "Nina recommended you personally." The kitchen bustled around us, line cooks preparing for dinner service. My last shift as sous chef. Sophie's already texting me about it. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Mom and Dad are worried about you taking on too much responsibility. Maybe you should think this through." "Delete it," Mason said, but I was already typing back. The kitchen door swung open and Nina strode in, her chef's whites pristine as always. "Riley, a word?" In her office, she didn't sit down. "The board approved your promotion unanimously, but there's something else." She paused, studying my face. "Your sister called the restaurant today." My stomach clenched. What did she want? She expressed concerns about your stability, mentioned some incident at a family dinner. Of course she had. I forced my voice to stay steady. "She sabotaged my food and faked an allergic reaction." I figured it was something like that. Nina's expression softened. "Look, I've dealt with family like Sophie before. They'll do anything to keep you small." The dinner service that night was flawless. Every dish perfect, every plate a small victory, until I saw Sophie seated at table 7, Kevin beside her, both dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. "I'll handle their table," Mason offered, but I shook my head. "No, this is my kitchen now." I approached their table, chin high. "Welcome to Maison Rouge." Sophie's smile was razor sharp. "We had to come congratulate you, though Kevin's father says executive chef positions usually require more experience." Kevin shifted uncomfortably. "Sophie, maybe we should—" "I'm just concerned," she continued, voice dripping honey. "After what happened at your birthday, well, pressure can make people crack." I felt the eyes of nearby diners. "Would you like to hear tonight's specials?" "Actually," Sophie leaned forward, "I was hoping to speak with your supervisor. There are some health concerns I'd like to discuss." My vision blurred at the edges. "I am the supervisor." "Oh, well, surely there's someone above you?" Later, in the walk-in cooler, I pressed my forehead against a shelf of prepped vegetables, letting the cold seep into my skin. Mason found me there. "The health inspector's coming tomorrow," he said quietly. "Anonymous complaint about food safety protocols." I laughed, a harsh sound in the confined space. "She works fast." "Nina's not worried. Our records are perfect." "It's not about the inspection." I straightened up, frost crackling under my fingers. "It's about making me look incompetent, unstable. She's trying to poison everything I touch." Mason stepped closer. "Then don't let her." "You don't understand. She's been doing this for years. Every achievement, every moment of pride. She finds a way to taint it. So fight back." I turned to face him. "What? You're executive chef now. You have power, influence. Use it." The idea settled in my chest like a hot coal. "That would make me just like her." "No," Mason's voice was firm. "It would make you someone who finally stands up for themselves." My phone buzzed again. Mom this time. "Sophie's worried about you, sweetie. Maybe we should discuss some other career options." I deleted the message without responding. Through the cooler's window, I could see Sophie still at her table, holding court with a group of regular customers who'd wandered over, probably sharing her concerns about the new executive chef's mental state. "You know what the difference is between Sophie and me?" I said, watching her perform. "She destroys things because she can, because it makes her feel powerful." "And you?" I pushed open the cooler door, the warm kitchen air rushing in. "I create things, beautiful things, and if she wants to turn this into a war, fine, but we're playing by my rules now." "Riley, send them the tasting menu," I called to the line. "On the house. Let's show my dear sister exactly what her unstable big sister can do, because Sophie had forgotten something crucial. In this kitchen, I was the one with the power to make or break someone's night. And I'd learned from the best about how to use that power. The bank statement sat on my desk like a loaded gun. Dad's signature on a second mortgage, dated 3 months ago. The same week Sophie had mysteriously acquired her new car. Tina knocked on my office door, her face tight with concern. "Chef, there's someone from the health department here again. 3rd time this week." I folded the paper carefully, tucking it into my jacket. "Let me guess, anonymous complaint? They're focusing on the prep stations this time." She hesitated. "And your sister's review just went live on the city's biggest food blog." Of course it had. I pulled it up on my phone, scanning the carefully crafted destruction. While Maison Rouge once stood as a culinary landmark, recent changes in leadership have led to concerning lapses in quality and safety. The kitchen door burst open, Nina striding in with thunder in her eyes. "Board meeting, now!" In the conference room, faces turned toward me with varying degrees of concern and judgment. Mr. Harrison, Kevin's father and majority stakeholder, spoke first. "These allegations are troubling, Miss Turner." "They're fabricated," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. "My sister has provided documented evidence of multiple health code violations." He slid photographs across the table, close-ups of my prep stations, somehow taken during service hours, and financial records suggesting mismanagement of resources. My throat closed up. The second mortgage. She'd found it too. "I can explain." "Perhaps," Nina cut in. "We should discuss this privately." But Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. "Your father called me personally this morning. He's quite concerned about your mental state." The room tilted slightly. Dad had never called anyone about me before, had never shown enough interest to interfere. "I've increased our profits by 30%, I said, pulling out spreadsheets with trembling hands. "Guest satisfaction is at an all-time high. Except for these reviews," another board member noted, "all from highly respected food critics. All Sophie's friends, more likely. I'd seen them at her table that night, laughing, taking notes." Mason appeared in the doorway, face pale. "Chef, there's a situation in the kitchen." I found Sophie standing at my pass, wearing pristine white designer clothes, examining a plate with theatrical concern. A health inspector hovered nearby, scribbling notes. "What are you doing here?" She turned, eyes wide with manufactured innocence. "Daddy asked me to check on you. He's worried sick about the restaurant's finances." Her voice carried across the kitchen. "All those missing inventory reports?" The missing reports I'd found buried in Kevin's desk last week after he'd volunteered to help organize the office. "Get out." "Riley." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "We're just trying to help. You're clearly overwhelmed. Maybe if you'd listened when we suggested a different career path." I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. She stumbled, catching herself against a prep station. Containers crashed to the floor, sending marinades and sauces spreading across pristine tiles. "Assault!" Sophie shrieked, holding her arm. "She's completely lost control." The health inspector's pen moved faster. Mason tried to intervene, but Sophie was already pulling out her phone, dialing with shaking fingers. "Daddy, she's having another episode. Yes, worse than my birthday. I don't feel safe." Later, after the inspector left with pages of violations, after Sophie's tearful exit and the board's emergency session, I sat alone in the dark kitchen. Nina found me there, methodically sharpening knives. "They're suspending you pending investigation," she said softly. I fought hard, but with the documented violations and the incident, it wasn't random. The knife edge caught light as I tested it. The mortgage, the missing reports, the perfectly timed inspections. She planned this for months. Riley, did you know my parents are broke? I looked up, meeting her worried gaze. But Sophie's tuition, her car, her apartment, it's all still paid for. They mortgaged their future for her, and she used that money to destroy mine. Nina pulled up a stool. What are you going to do? I set down the knife, its edge now razor sharp. Sophie thinks she's won because she knows how to manipulate people, but I know how to build things from nothing, and I know exactly how to burn it all down. That path leads nowhere good. No, I agreed, standing up, but neither does letting her win. The food truck's generator hummed beneath my feet as I prepped for lunch service. 3 weeks since losing my position at Maison Rouge, and already the cramped kitchen felt more like home than that pristine restaurant ever had. Mason wiped condensation from the window. Lines forming already. They're here for the food, I said, chopping herbs with practiced precision. Not the drama. But drama found me anyway. Sophie's sleek car pulled into the lot, parking directly in front of my truck. She emerged wearing oversized sunglasses, Kevin trailing behind her like a well-trained puppy. Health inspection, she called out, waving a badge. Anonymous tip about improper food storage. The knife stilled in my hand. That's not a real badge. No, she smiled. Kevin's father knows people on the council. They're very concerned about unlicensed vendors in this area. The growing lunch crowd watched our exchange with interest. Sophie played to them, raising her voice. We're just worried about public safety. After what happened at Maison Rouge, your food truck permit, Kevin mumbled, not meeting my eyes. It might need additional review. Mason stepped between us. We have all the required documentation. Documentation can be challenged, Sophie said sweetly, especially with prior violations on record. I spotted Nina in the crowd, her expression grim. She'd warned me about this, how Sophie would keep pushing until I broke again. Order up, I called out instead of responding, sliding a container across the counter to my first customer. House special with extra herbs. Sophie's smile faltered. Did you hear what I said? Perfect timing, I continued, addressing the growing line. Today's special is revenge served cold, a dish I learned from an expert. I met Sophie's gaze, though some people prefer their sabotage hot and public. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sophie's carefully crafted mask cracked slightly. You're unstable, she hissed. Everyone knows it. Really? I turned to Kevin. Tell them about the missing inventory reports you planted. Or should I call your father about the real reason Maison Rouge's numbers didn't add up? Kevin paled. Sophie grabbed his arm, but he shook her off. I can't, he started. Sophie, you said nobody would get hurt. Kevin, shut up. But he was already backing away. You promised it was just about teaching her a lesson, not all this. The crowd watched, enthralled, as Sophie's perfect facade began to crack. She reached for Kevin, but he was already walking to his car. You're making a scene, she snapped at me. Again. No, I said quietly. I'm making lunch. You're the one putting on a show. Nina stepped forward then, phone in hand. I recorded everything, Riley, including Kevin's confession about the reports. Sophie's face contorted. You think this changes anything? Mom and Dad will never choose me over you? I finished plating another order. I know, that's not what this is about anymore. Then what? It's about building something of my own, something you can't touch. I gestured to the line of waiting customers. These people aren't here because of our family drama. They're here because I create something worth having. We'll see about that, Sophie snarled, but her voice shook slightly. She turned on her heel, nearly running to her car. After she peeled out of the lot, Nina approached the window. You okay? I looked down at my hands, steady now as they arranged garnishes. I thought revenge would feel different, more satisfying, and it feels empty. I passed another order to a waiting customer. But this, creating something new, this feels real. Mason bumped my shoulder gently. Speaking of creating something new, we got 3 more catering requests this morning. I nodded, already planning the menus. Sophie might have taken Maison Rouge from me, but she'd given me something unexpected in return, the push I needed to break free. "Chef," Tina called from outside. "The food blog critics are here, the real ones this time." I straightened my apron, catching my reflection in the steel counter. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd let Sophie destroy her birthday dinner. She was stronger now, focused on building rather than breaking. "Let's show them what we can do," I said, reaching for my knives. Because the best revenge wasn't destroying Sophie's world, it was creating my own, far beyond her reach. The local food magazine's cover story sat on my prep counter. My food truck's success splashed across glossy pages. 3 months of grinding work had paid off, until I saw the headline, "Rising Star or Family Fraud, the Turner Sisters Restaurant Wars." I crumpled the magazine just as Mason rushed in. "Riley, the truck!" The acrid smell of burning rubber hit me before I reached the door. All 4 tires slashed, brake fluid pooling underneath. On the side panel, someone had scratched "unstable" in jagged letters. "Security cameras caught everything," Mason said quietly. It was Kevin. Of course it was. Sophie's perfect puppet, trying to earn his way back into her good graces. Nina appeared with 2 police officers, but I barely heard their questions. My phone buzzed. Mom's number. "Did you see the article?" Her voice trembled. "Sophie's devastated. They quoted you saying terrible things about our family." "I never gave them an interview." "Then who did?" A pause. "Your father's law firm is losing clients. People are asking questions about Sophie's internship, about the family finances." I ended the call as Tina arrived with our day's supplies. "The restaurant supplier won't extend credit anymore. Someone called them about potential fraud." The pieces clicked together. Sophie wasn't just attacking my business. She was scorching the earth around it, making sure I couldn't rebuild. "We have that big catering event tomorrow," Mason reminded me. "The tech company launch? Cancel it." "Riley, we can't serve food from a vandalized truck, Mason. We can't." My voice cracked. The magazine's pages scattered across the ground, Sophie's smiling photo mocking me from every angle. Nina picked up a page. "She's playing a dangerous game." "No," I said, something cold settling in my chest. "She's playing my game now. The restaurant supplies, the magazine. She's using my own tactics against me." "What do you mean?" But I was already dialing Sophie's number. She answered on the first ring. "Enjoying the press coverage?" "You know what's interesting?" I kept my voice steady. How the magazine knew exactly which suppliers to contact, almost like someone had access to Maison Rouge's vendor list. A slight intake of breath. "I don't know what you're—" "Kevin still has the original inventory reports, doesn't he? The ones that would prove embezzlement?" Silence. "Let's meet. Just us. No more proxies, no more games." "Why should I?" "Because I'm done playing defense." I watched brake fluid stain the asphalt black. "And because I know about the trust fund." Another sharp breath. "You're bluffing." Mom's not as careful with her papers as she used to be, especially after a few glasses of wine. I hadn't known for sure until her reaction confirmed it. "Does Kevin know where your designer wardrobe really comes from? That you've been stealing from your own parents?" "Tonight," she said quickly. "The old restaurant." I hung up, turning to find Mason watching me with concern. "Riley, whatever you're planning, help me clean this up." I gestured to the truck. "We have work to do." Nina stepped forward. "This isn't just about the business anymore, is it?" I picked up a torn magazine page, studying Sophie's carefully curated image. She thought teaching me a lesson meant breaking me down, but she taught me something else instead. What's that? That some people only understand their own language. I started gathering supplies, mind already racing with plans. She wants to play with fire? Fine, let's see who burns first. You're starting to sound like her, Mason warned. No, I faced him, feeling calmer than I had in months. I'm starting to sound like someone who's finally stopped being afraid of her own shadow. The setting sun cast long shadows through the truck's windows, turning everything blood red. Tomorrow's catering event would have been my biggest yet, proof that I could build something lasting from nothing. Instead, I had a different kind of proving to do. Nina, I need your help accessing some old Maison Rouge records. Mason, call Kevin. Tell him you have information about Sophie he needs to hear. Tina, start calling our regulars. Tell them we're planning something special. What are you going to do? Nina asked. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through recent photos until I found it. Sophie's signature on Dad's mortgage papers, perfectly forged. I'm going to give my sister exactly what she wants, all the attention she can handle. Maison Rouge's empty dining room felt like a tomb. Moonlight filtered through unwashed windows, casting shadows across tables where I'd once served my creations. Sophie sat at our usual family table, wearing white like she was going to her own funeral. You're late, she said. I placed the folder between us. So are these mortgage payments. Her perfectly manicured fingers didn't quite reach for it. You have no proof I forged anything, don't I? I slid out a document. Dad's signature looks different here than on the original loan, almost like someone practiced it dozens of times. A muscle twitched in her jaw. What do you want? The truth. For once. I leaned forward. Why did you do it? Was ruining my career not enough? Your career? She laughed, a brittle sound. You think this was about your little cooking hobby? Then what? They mortgaged everything for you first. Her voice cracked. Your culinary school, your internships, your equipment. There was nothing left for me. That's not. When I needed tuition, Dad had to take out loans. When I wanted to start my own business, they could barely afford groceries. Her eyes glittered, but Precious Riley needed her dreams funded. The revelation hit like a physical blow. You never said anything. Would you have listened? You were too busy becoming the family's golden child, the one with real talent. Movement caught my eye. Kevin slipping through the kitchen door. Then Mason emerging from the shadows. Nina stepping out from behind a pillar. All according to plan. Sophie noticed too late. What is this? I stood, steady despite my racing heart. The truth, remember? Kevin, show her. He placed a USB drive on the table. The original inventory reports and other things. Sophie's face drained of color. You promised. He promised you, I corrected. Just like you promised him love. But it was all manipulation, wasn't it? Riley, Mason warned, but I couldn't stop now. The trust fund transfers, the forged signatures, the fake health inspections, it's all documented. One anonymous tip to the right authorities. Sophie shot to her feet. You wouldn't dare. It would destroy Mom and Dad. Like you destroyed my reputation, my business? That was different. I was protecting yourself, I finished. Always yourself. She lunged for the USB drive, but Kevin snatched it away. I'm sorry, he whispered. I can't keep lying for you. The look she gave him could have frozen hell. After everything I did for you? You mean to him? Nina stepped forward. There's a difference. Sophie's composure cracked completely. You think you've won? That exposing me will fix anything? She pulled out her phone. Mom and Dad are on their way. Let's see who they believe. My stomach dropped. This wasn't part of the plan. What? You're not the only one who can set a trap. Her smile turned vicious. I told them you were having another breakdown, that you'd threatened to expose family secrets unless they came. Headlights swept across the windows. Car doors slammed. Riley, Mason grabbed my arm. We need to go. But I stood frozen as Mom and Dad burst in, their faces masks of concern and disappointment. Sophie, honey, are you okay? Mom rushed to her while Dad blocked my path to the door. What's the meaning of this? He demanded. Sophie's tears flowed perfectly on cue. She's trying to blackmail me, Daddy. Says she'll ruin us all unless... I looked at the folder in my hands, at the evidence that could destroy my sister's carefully constructed world, and realized she'd won again, because using it meant burning down what remained of our family. Riley? Dad's voice hardened. Explain yourself. The truth stuck in my throat like undercooked food. Everything I'd planned, every calculated move, had led to this moment. But looking at their faces, Mom's fear, Dad's anger, Sophie's hidden triumph, I realized the cost was too high. The folder slipped from my fingers, papers scattering across the floor. I'm sorry. I turned and ran, ignoring Mason's calls, Nina's protests, Kevin's guilty expression. Behind me, Sophie's voice rose in perfect victim pitch, spinning a story of her unstable sister's latest attack. Outside, rain had started to fall, washing away the last traces of my revenge, like spilled wine on a white tablecloth. I'd tried to beat Sophie at her own game, only to discover she'd been playing a different one all along, and I'd lost everything in the process. 3 days after I ran from Maison Rouge, Mom showed up at my apartment door, clutching her purse like a shield. Her eyes widened at the sight of boxes stacked behind me. You're leaving? Nina offered me a position at her new restaurant in Seattle. She stepped inside uninvited, scanning the half-packed kitchen. Sophie's in the hospital. The wooden spoon in my hand cracked. Another performance? She tried to... Mom's voice broke. The doctors say it was a cry for help. Everything she does is a cry for help. Riley, please, your father found the trust fund documents. I froze. What? They were scattered across Maison Rouge's floor. He's been up all night going through everything. She pulled out a familiar folder, my evidence against Sophie. He knows about the forgeries, the embezzlement, everything. My phone buzzed. Mason texting about flight details. I ignored it. Kevin confessed, too, Mom continued, about the restaurant sabotage, the false reports. Sophie's been... She searched for words. Unraveling. And you want me to what? Feel sorry for her? I want you to understand. She opened the folder, revealing documents I hadn't seen before. I've been keeping these for years. Every withdrawal from your culinary school fund, every loan payment. Sophie was right. We spent everything on your dreams first. The truth hit like scalding oil. So this was my fault? No, sweetheart. It was ours. She pulled out another paper, a check stub. We should have told you both the truth about the money, about our fears. Instead, we let Sophie believe she wasn't worth the same investment, and we let you believe you had to prove yourself worthy of it. My phone buzzed again. The Seattle job wouldn't wait forever. Where is she? Mom's relief was palpable. Memorial Hospital. Your father's there now. The hospital room was eerily quiet except for machine beeps. Sophie looked small in the bed, her perfect makeup gone, her armor stripped away. Dad sat beside her, holding her hand, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Come to finish what you started? Sophie's voice was raw. You did that yourself. Dad stood, but I waved him back down. It's okay. We need to talk. About what? How you won? She laughed bitterly. Congratulations, you destroyed everything. No, I moved closer. We destroyed everything, both of us. Don't pretend we're the same, aren't we? You forged signatures because you felt cheated. I built a food truck because I felt invisible. We both wanted to prove something. I never wanted to hurt anyone, neither did I, but here we are. She turned away. Just go to Seattle. Leave us to clean up your mess. Our mess, I corrected. And I'm not going anywhere. That got her attention. What? I pulled out my phone, showing her the message I just sent Nina. I have to pass. Family emergency. You're making a mistake, Sophie whispered. Probably, but I'm done running from difficult recipes. Dad cleared his throat. Riley, the restaurant board called. With Kevin's confession and the evidence of Sophie's involvement, I don't want my job back. I met Sophie's startled gaze. I want to start fresh, build something new. Why? Because we're both better than this version of ourselves. I reached for her hand, feeling it tremble in mine. And because someone needs to show you there's more to life than being perfect. I don't know how, she admitted, voice barely audible. Neither do I, but I know how to create something from nothing, how to take raw ingredients and make them work together. I squeezed her hand. Maybe we start there. Mom appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She stopped, taking in the scene. Her daughters holding hands, her husband wiping tears, the broken pieces of our family slowly shifting into a new configuration. The doctors want to discuss treatment options, she said softly. Sophie's hand tightened on mine. Will you stay? The question held more than just its surface meaning. Stay for the discussion. Stay in town. Stay and face the mess we'd made together. Yes, I said, pulling up a chair. I'll stay. Because sometimes the best recipes come from salvaging what's burned, from transforming bitter ingredients into something unexpectedly sweet. And sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about refusing to let them destroy themselves. The new restaurant's kitchen gleamed under fresh lights, everything in its place. I adjusted the frame holding my first review, not from a critic, but a simple social media post about my food truck's final day. The comments section overflowed with customers asking when Turner and Sister would open. These portions are wrong. Sophie's voice carried from the prep station. The recipe says, sometimes you have to trust your instincts, I called back. Not everything follows a perfect formula. She appeared in my office doorway, chef's whites still pristine despite hours of prep work. The investors are arriving in an hour. I know. And you're not worried? I smiled, remembering similar conversations from months of therapy sessions and cooking lessons. About the food? Never. The dining room slowly filled with familiar faces. Nina sat with Mason, their heads bent over wine selections. Kevin had declined his invitation, but sent a letter Sophie kept in her apron pocket. Mom and Dad arrived last, holding hands like nervous teenagers. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room. Tonight's menu tells a story. Each dish represents a moment of transformation. Sophie stepped forward, her voice steady. We begin with a dual amuse-bouche, one bitter, one sweet. Together, they create something unexpected. The evening flowed like perfectly timed courses. Between service, I caught glimpses of my sister actually smiling, explaining to guests how she'd adapted my recipes to include her own touches. Mom wiped tears when she tasted our grandmother's updated soup recipe. Dad actually put down his phone. During dessert, Nina pulled me aside. Seattle's opening another location. Are you offering me a job again? No, she smiled. I'm offering you a partnership, both of you. I watched Sophie carefully plating chocolate work, her focus absolute. We're not ready. You are, but that's not why I'm here. She handed me an envelope. Your mother asked me to give you this. Said she's been adding to it since your first cooking class. Inside, I found years of receipts, notes, and photographs. Mom had documented everything: my culinary school applications, competition wins, even food truck permits. She'd been watching, supporting from the shadows, too afraid of disrupting the family's fragile balance to show it. Riley, Sophie called out, the final course. I tucked the envelope away. Coming, we presented the last dish together, a deconstructed version of that fateful birthday dinner. But this time, the heat came from carefully balanced spices, not hidden sabotage. It's perfect, Mom whispered, and for once, she was looking at both of us. Later, after the guests left and the kitchen was cleaned, Sophie and I sat at the bar, sharing the last slice of cake. I found another one of your old recipe notebooks, she said quietly. From before. Everything. And you wrote about teaching me to cook someday, about us working together. She pushed the plate away. I ruined that dream for you. No, I turned to face her. You just took a different path to get there. Why did you give me another chance? Because revenge wasn't making me a better chef or a better person. I stood, gathering our plates. And because some ingredients need time to develop their full flavor. She followed me to the kitchen, where tomorrow's prep lists waited. The critics will compare us, try to pit us against each other again. Let them. I handed her a pen. We know the real recipe now. As we worked on the next day's menu, I thought about Nina's offer, Mom's secret support, the long road of healing ahead. Success wouldn't erase the past, but maybe it could help write a different future. Riley? Sophie's voice was hesitant. Thank you for not giving up on me. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something new. Not the perfect daughter or the manipulative antagonist, but someone as complex as the dishes we created together. Someone worth the time and effort to understand. That's what family does, I said, and meant it. Now, about those portions. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. And somewhere between the prep lists and tomorrow's specials, I realized that the best revenge hadn't been destroying Sophie's world or even building my own. It had been finding a way to create something new together, something neither of us could have made alone.
Being with you just makes me poorer, so I want a divorce. You can have the kid, just pay me $80,000. When I got home, my husband, Ned, suddenly brought up divorce. Up until today, I had been very devoted to supporting him. Unforgivable. I will definitely make him regret this. Without showing my feelings, I coldly responded to him. Fine. My casual response must have shaken Ned. But it's too late. From now on, you're going to see hell. My name is Sandra Irving. I'm a 25-year-old front desk clerk at a hotel. Last year, I married Ned, my boss at the time. I became pregnant at the beginning of this year and left the company. The workplace I left was warm and comfortable to the very end, celebrated by everyone. Since then, I have been a full-time housewife, working hard on housework and childcare. Our newborn son cries a lot at night and doesn't drink well. Despite the chaos of having a child for the first time, Ned had been devotedly supportive. However, Ned suddenly changed one day. He used to be proactive with household chores and took care of the child. But his recent behavior has been strange. I've got a work dinner tonight, so I won't need dinner. That's a lot, huh? I understand for a sales job, but it's tough when it's you all the time. You gotta do what you gotta do. I'm off. There were never weekly drinking parties when I was working. Especially since he was like the head of the restaurant department. Such meetings were supposed to be during working hours. It was unheard of him to go to drinking parties after work, even when our son was born. But recently, this lifestyle has become the norm. I convinced myself that things must have changed since my time. However, that led to suspicions due to Ned's certain behavior. I'm home. Is the bath ready? Welcome back. It's ready. Ned seemed unusually happy when he returned from the drinking party, and strangely sober. Which made me question his expression. Ned, you're usually not good with alcohol, but you seem fine today.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't drink much. Ned appeared greatly disturbed by my casual remark. Another surprise was nearby him. It wasn't the smell of alcohol but the scent of women's perfume. Usually, he would have a drink with snacks as soon as he got home, but today was different. He immediately asked for a bath. At that moment, a sense of discomfort arose in me. You usually come home drunk after being forced to drink so much? Today the sales manager wasn't there next to me. Thanks to that. Don't sweat the small stuff. Just worry about your chores. People often express lies through negative words and speed up their speech without realizing it. Ned was particularly prone to taking a domineering attitude. Hearing his words, I instantly sensed his guilt. Despite this, he continued to go to drinking parties. And there were times when he came home early in the morning. I was convinced that Ned is keeping something from me. When he returned home early one morning and left for work without sleeping. This is Ned's phone. He had unusually left his phone on the sofa, and I found it. While holding the phone and contemplating whether to bring it to him, Ned returned home. Seeing me with his phone, he snatched it back with a look of disgust. What are you doing touching someone else's phone? Huh? I was just wondering whether to bring it to you since you left it here. Shut up. You didn't look, did you? While he quickly put the phone in his chest pocket, he glared at me with a look of contempt. The way he looked at me made me more certain. He thought it would be bad if I saw what I shouldn't see. This might be the moment, I thought. But if it's another woman, it would be bad to confront him now and have him delete the evidence. I haven't looked. I wouldn't stoop so low. What's with that tone? Who do you think is feeding you? Know your place. Trying to intimidate with power, Ned slammed his bag onto the table. He was trying to dominate me through force. If I were alone, I would talk back and leave the house right now. But I can't do that with my precious son here. Who knows what could happen? I need to endure. Endure and expose Ned's wrongdoing. I clenched my fists hard, desperately trying to control my anger with pain. As if sensing my feelings, our son, who was sleeping in another room, woke up and realized I wasn't there. I could hear his desperate cries calling for me. Shut him up already. His irritable shout made me flinch, and I could almost see him raising his fist. I shrank from his menacing look. How did our relationship come to this? At the beginning of our marriage, there was nothing like this. But upon reflection, maybe I was just blind. His behavior had always hinted at something like this. In the early days of our marriage, Ned insisted on meticulous household rules. Clean the toilet after every use, never leave dishes in the sink. He demanded that meals only be eaten after all the dishes were washed. And the sink was scrubbed clean. I was expected to clean up after every meal Ned ate and take care of all the laundry. If his shoes were dirty, it was up to me to notice and clean them without being asked. I remember these directives led to arguments between us, as I was overwhelmed by the constant demands. The amount of housework has increased compared to when I lived at my parents' house. And on top of that, there's childcare. Ned, who initially helped out, is now acting like this. Why did I get married in the first place? I've reached my limit in this environment, where I feel like I'm doing more work than a housemaid. Especially with his treatment now. I've reached my breaking point and want to divorce him. I want to grab my son and flee this house right now. It was during these thoughts that a turning point arrived. Sandra, what is this? It was about a month after I started digging into Ned's affairs. I had just put my son to sleep and was finally enjoying some alone time when Ned confronted me with a picture. It was a snapshot of a pleasant coffee time with a former colleague from my previous job. What are you doing so leisurely outside while I'm at work? I finished the housework and went out for some coffee to stretch my legs. What's wrong with that? Where do you get the money for this? You've been wasting the living expenses I give you. Ned mistakenly believed that I had misused the living expenses on non-essential things. Without listening to my side, he started yelling loudly. At that moment, our son, who was supposed to be sleeping, woke up and began to cry loudly. Shut up. Stop wailing. Despite the fact that our son was crying in another room, Ned went out of his way to enter the room and scold him. At that moment, feeling the need to protect my son, I stood in front of the door in a defiant stance, determined not to let him pass. Move it. No, I won't move. Do you even realize what you're trying to do? He's just a newborn baby. It's insane to yell at such a small child. Over the past few days, it seemed my eyes had been opened. Staying with this man would bring no happy future for either me or my son. I wanted to leave right away. I had enough reasons to leave. All that was left was to gather the funds to do so. I still couldn't raise my son alone. First, I needed to find a job. I had to look for one discreetly, not at my previous workplace. As I was thinking this, Ned forcefully pushed me aside, opened the door violently, and left it open as he coldly spoke. Get out. I don't need a wife who can't show respect to her husband. Pack your things and leave now. Wait, what are you saying? Don't be unreasonable. Just leave. You're an eyesore, you maggot. After using my money without permission and that arrogant tone. Who do you think you are? If you're going to talk back like that, I don't need you anymore. Take the kid and just disappear. Ned hurled insults at me and, while shoving our crying son and my belongings at me, he threw us out the front door. He locked the door, making it completely impossible for me to return home. I was left wandering the streets with my newborn son. In the quiet back alley late at night, only my son's sad cries echoed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Because I was such a failure as a parent. I'm really sorry for putting you through this hardship. Fearing a disturbance report from the neighbors, I quickly moved to a park. Holding my son tightly to keep him warm, ensuring he felt my presence. As I apologized over and over, determined to protect him at all costs. I planned to seek help from the city office or somewhere else once the sun rose. Just then, as if to add insult to injury, it began to rain. Without an umbrella, I held my son close to shield him from the rain. And tears fell just like the raindrops. If only I had seen through Ned sooner and divorced him before our child was born. If I had been a stronger woman, none of this would have happened. Despairing over my helpless situation, an elderly man appeared. What's wrong? Why are you here at this time? Despite it being past 3 a.m., a well-dressed elderly man offered his umbrella to shelter me and my son. What happened to bring you and such a small child out here? The man, likely living in the grand house across the park, had heard the continuous crying of my son and came to check on us. Although it was suspicious to be approached by someone at such an hour, for some reason, I felt a sense of nostalgia towards the elderly man. as I shared the recent distressing events. He didn't say a word but covered my head with his towel and gently dried my hair. Come to my house. I have female servants who can help care for the baby. It's too cruel to spend the night here. Moved by his kind tone and compassion, my tears flowed endlessly. Accepting his invitation, I followed him with my sobbing son into his home, where a shocking truth would soon be revealed. Leave the rest to me. Nodding at his words, I decided to rest for the time being. His servants were kind and gladly took care of my son. Thanks to them, I was able to sleep soundly for the first time in a long while, waking up only in the afternoon. A female servant noticed my awakening and mentioned that my phone had been ringing a lot. She had refrained from waking me, considering my deep sleep. Grateful for their kindness, I checked the missed calls, unsurprisingly all from Ned. Likely, he couldn't prepare breakfast without me and was demanding I return immediately. His calls were typical of a hopeless husband, making me regret ever seeing anything good in him. Though I didn't want to return, ignoring him could lead to trouble with the police. Deciding to speak with Ned, I took my son and headed home once more. Thus began the fierce battle between me and Ned. You. Where have you been wandering around until now? Not preparing breakfast, leaving the house a mess. After such a stupid argument yesterday. You stubbornly didn't come home all night. I nearly snapped back, but I suppressed the urge to retaliate. How am I supposed to enter when the door is locked? And how would I know about the lack of breakfast? If you regret not being able to prepare it yourself, you shouldn't have driven me away. You're the smart one, aren't you? He always belittled me. A smart person like Ned would have avoided such a situation altogether. But in the end, he was the one in trouble. He should realize it's all his own doing. With that in mind, I goaded him by throwing his words back at him, and I saw his temples twitch. I've had it. I can't do this anymore. His anger must have reached its peak. I don't know when he prepared it. But Ned pulled a piece of paper from his room and slammed it on the living room table. We're getting a divorce. I never want to see your face again. There, on the table, lay the divorce papers with Ned's name on them. He must have thought I would panic upon seeing it. His face, expecting an apology, revealed his inner thoughts. But I wasn't going to play into his hands. I grabbed a pen from a nearby shelf and signed without hesitation. Understood. You're unusually compliant. With no job and no parents, you have nowhere to go. What are you going to do now? Despite his outward bravado, I could see the cold sweat on his forehead. The twitching corners of his mouth, and the look on his face said it all. Such a foolish man. While inwardly despising him, I quickly gathered my remaining belongings. Silent, huh? Well, fine. This feels refreshing. As I ignored his words and packed, Ned, seemingly carefree, delivered the final blow. Being with you just makes me poorer, so I want a divorce. You can have the kid, just pay me $80,000. Perhaps because I wasn't visibly shaken, Ned demanded a reckless amount of money. I was utterly astounded internally. He was trying to shake me with money, to rile me up. If we got into an argument, he could dominate the conversation and manipulate me. Then he would impose even more restrictions on me, making my life miserable while he freely enjoyed himself. Reading through Ned's transparent thoughts, I turned around with a broad smile and quickly responded. Fine. Hearing this, Ned visibly faltered and panicked. Do you understand? $80,000. $80,000. There's no way you can come up with that kind of money. Is that all you want to say? I'll transfer it by the end of the month. You handle the rest.
Bye.
And so, our divorce was finalized. As Ned instructed, I transferred a large sum of $80,000 to his account. I was aware of his affair and had gathered evidence. But I chose not to demand compensation from him. Because from now on, I plan to show him a hell that money can't redeem. 2 weeks later. When I woke up in the morning, my phone was bombarded with calls from Ned. It was finally happening. Ned would surely call again. Sure enough, he called. I didn't answer the first time, and on the second call, I hung up shortly after picking up. On the third call, I finally answered, and Ned, his voice raised and speaking rapidly, blurted out. You. What do you think you're doing? Are you messing with me? If I had answered on the first call, I could have kept the conversation calm and controlled. My actions on the second call were meant to frustrate him. Maintaining his irritation was essential. If he remained rational, my plan would be jeopardized. I needed to provoke his short temper and make him lose his cool. And on the third call, I deliberately chose not to start speaking. To keep the upper hand, I needed to keep him agitated. You're always so loud. I can adjust the volume on my phone, so there's no need to yell. What do you want? I'm quite busy, you know. While saying this, I elegantly sipped my coffee and flipped through a magazine. Busy was a lie. I was enjoying a leisurely day off with my son. Making it seem like I was too engaged in real life to bother with him was merely part of my rhetoric. What have you done? What are you talking about? I haven't done anything. Such a lie. In truth, I had taken everything from Ned. His wife, his job, his money, his family. I had stripped him of everything. That's a lie. Only you could have done such a thing. Give me back everything. You liar. Ned was crying bitterly over the phone. His pained cries almost amusing to me, and I laughed to myself. Why don't you try explaining what I did? I seem to have a bad memory these days. I can't remember a thing. Unlike him, destined for hell, I continued to enjoy my magazine and coffee time. He spoke to me in a fading voice, revealing shocking news. Immediately after our divorce, Ned remarried his current wife. Of course, I knew she had been his affair partner while he was married to me. It also turned out she was the daughter of a president of a client company. Apparently, Ned had concealed the fact that he was married. And on the day he proposed divorce, it was revealed that she was pregnant. Ned hurriedly divorced me and remarried her. Because she was connected to the largest contract among his clients. Thus, in a rush, Ned pushed for the divorce. His plan to divorce me succeeded, but that was just the beginning of his tragedy. First, he was kicked out of his house by his wife today. And she demanded a divorce because she found out about his previous marriage. Upon learning that I also have a child, she became furious. As she demanded compensation and announced the divorce, Ned panicked and lashed out at her. His rage was so severe that even his parents tried to intervene. He caused both mental and physical distress to his wife, leading her to report the situation at his workplace. The hotel he worked at decided they couldn't contract with someone like him and fired him. It was as if they clearly chose their business partners over him, and in one day, he lost both his wife and his job. Additionally, he had to use the entire $80,000 he received from me to pay for compensation and damages to the company, leaving him penniless. The damages to the company were so great that even $80,000 was not enough, and he had to use up all his savings. How did she know about my previous marriage? The only one who would do something like that is you. You stole my happiness. Ned screamed in frustration. I closed the magazine I was reading and decided to face him directly. His utter lack of remorse infuriated me. I had intended to just listen to him and hang up. But his continued refusal to reflect on his misdeeds was unbearable. I couldn't stand it. Stole your happiness? It's just karma. You cheated while you were with me, you were abusive to your wife leading to your divorce. And you got fired from your job, all because of your own actions. What did you say? You are nothing, and you dare to preach to me like that? You must be living a busy life because you can't support a kid on your own. This is the punishment for dumping me. He must have mistaken that I was working from morning to night. Holding up the magazine in front of me, I scorned him inwardly while politely delivering a sarcastic remark. I was busy reading a beauty magazine until just now, but I've finished. Now I'm thinking about having my second cup of coffee and maybe doing some knitting. What? How is that busy? Are you mocking me? Even over the phone, I could imagine him turning red and steaming like an octopus. My cheerful laughter probably irritated him even more. His shouting didn't stop. But even that was pleasant to me. I had been unable to say anything to him before, but now I was easily manipulating him. The unreachable environment where he could only shout was frustrating for him. And he demanded to see me immediately. Where are you? A phone call isn't enough. I'm coming over to your house right now. Sandra Irving, you're welcome to come, but you'll be turned away. I'll let the servants know that you're an outsider and absolutely not allowed in. Servants? Yes. I'm currently living in a mansion. With my father. I switched to a video call to show him the surprising scene. Chairman. Displayed on the screen was the elderly man who had helped me. And he was the chairman of his workplace. He was my father. Hello, Ned. Nice to meet you, perhaps? I'm Sandra's father. What? Huh? Father? How come? Chairman, I don't understand at all. Ned, who had been told I had no father, was visibly shaken. Even though I couldn't see his face, I could imagine his bewildered expression. Actually, I was divorced from Sandra's mother when she was pregnant with her. My parents had a romance despite their different social statuses. My father was the heir to a financial conglomerate, and my mother was a commoner. The child of a salaryman and an office lady. Grandmother disapproved of their marriage. And the entire family opposed it so vehemently that my father was disowned and lost all support. Seeing this, my mother broke up with him. And gave birth to me in a state where only recognition from the father was allowed. To avoid tarnishing the family name, they did not marry. But he recognized the child and sent child support every month. Unfortunately, mother passed away quite some time ago. I always wanted to meet Sandra and her family, but she was taught that I didn't exist in this world. It would have been too cruel to tell such a young child about her father's situation. Last year, my mother passed away. She asked my father to look after me, and it seems he cared for me from afar. I knew about your marriage because I was at the company. But that day, I was really surprised to see Sandra soaking wet in front of the house. You were being taken care of by the chairman that day? Yes. My father helped us when we were drenched. As I glared at him with a stern look, my father gently put his arm around my back and supported me. You said I had no economic power, didn't you? Unfortunately for you. I have inherited my father's company, and now my total assets are $13 million. I'm not petty enough to fuss over $80,000. That was all. The reason I wasn't shaken by the large sum of $80,000 that day was because my father had proposed this plan when he rescued us. That woman in the photo is the daughter of someone I know. I'll explain the situation to her partner, and they will divorce him soon. They are intelligent people, I think they will understand. Don't worry about any financial issues, I'll take care of everything. Sandra, you should prioritize yourself and your child. You are a precious keepsake from your mother. I won't let you be unhappy. Be at ease. With these words from my father, I easily agreed to the divorce. The amount demanded was transferred without hesitation. So, all this time, you were innocently manipulated by us. Have you finally understood, you fool? It's laughable that you think you're so smart. I snorted in derision, and he didn't respond, seemingly crestfallen. It was over. I truly felt it was hopeless, and there was nothing else to do but to back down. Thus, our fierce dispute came to an end. Ned never interfered with us again. Years later, my son became an elementary school student. Surrounded by my father and son, I led a fulfilling life, both professionally and personally. The servants were kind to us, and I finally felt I had captured the warmth of a family. Infertile defects, get lost. I'm also going to demand compensation. Scott, who has been suffering from a chronic illness and has been searching for a donor. Suddenly, he proposed a divorce to me, who had been supporting him earnestly. Not understanding why, I was stunned, but his words made me decide on the divorce. Understood, I replied shortly, and left. The next day, as I was unpacking at my new place, I had received 27 missed calls from Scott. It was too late by the time I realized the seriousness of the situation. I'll show him hell. My name is Megan Hansen. I have been married to Scott for 7 years. My married life with him has been tough and harsh. It all started from suspicions of infertility since we couldn't have children. Among his siblings, we were the only ones without children. Every time we met, his mother would rush us asking about grandchildren. And Scott would continue loveless acts just for the sake of having children. I was pitted by his siblings and their wives. And each visit to his parents' house wore me down mentally. Hey, I'm just saying, but could it be infertility? It was the 3rd year of trying to conceive. Since there was no sign of pregnancy, Scott began to suspect my infertility. I've also been feeling anxious and did some research. If we can't have a child after 5 years, we can't deny that possibility. Seriously? A woman who can't have children is the worst. It's like a fraud. What? I couldn't believe what Scott had just said. Why is it only my fault? Well, it's obvious. I've never heard of male infertility, and nobody around here has it. It's mostly the women's fault. There's no way I'm that rare case. The cause of infertility isn't just with women. Men can also be infertile, and without any tests done at this stage, I couldn't accept being blamed alone. Deciding now who's at fault without any tests isn't right. Whether it's good or bad, if infertility is discovered after testing, we should proceed with treatment and try to have a child. Isn't it important to think about the future? If testing reveals infertility, that's the end of it. I have a junior who's been trying IVF and complaining about the high costs. I don't want to go through all that. And I'll just tell my parents you're infertile and to give up on grandchildren. That's the end of it. There's no need to talk about the future. No matter what, he wanted me to be the cause. Why do I have to be labeled infertile? I've been saying over and over, we won't know unless we test. Watching Scott interact listlessly, seemingly uninterested in the conversation, my irritation grew. Day by day, I worried about not being able to conceive, a concern that Scott had voiced as well. As the days I felt anxious about not conceiving continued, I wondered if I might be the cause. However, my friends and parents encouraged me. And they always suggested discussing it with Scott. Despite this support, Scott not only failed to face the issue but also kept rejecting me. He wouldn't listen and just blamed me for not conceiving. Enraged, I raised my voice and he glared at me annoyingly. There's no way I'm the cause. My brothers all have children. I've heard that infertility can be genetic. Indeed, my mother said she struggled to conceive me and my sister. But it wasn't infertility, just timing. Knowing this, Scott wanted to pin the blame on me. Your hypothesis is disproved by the fact that my sister and I were born. But neither you nor your sister have children. My family does, so obviously the problem is with your body. There's no reason I should be blamed. My sister and her husband had just married 6 months ago. It's unreasonable for them to start trying for children so soon. Scott jumps to conclusions without even understanding such matters. I clenched my fists in anger at Scott's stubbornness. So you just want to blame me? It's not my fault, it's yours. If you're going to say that, let's get tested properly. You're confident you have what it takes, right? Then, let's go together and get it clear. I also wanted to know if I was infertile. Even if something happened and we divorced. If I remarried and tried to have children with someone new, I wanted to know my chances. With this discussion, I started to consider divorcing Scott. Unaware of my thoughts, Scott easily fell for cheap provocations. Fine? Since it's your fault anyway, there's no problem even if we test. Thus, we decided to get a fertility test together. However, right after this incident, Scott's chronic illness was diagnosed. He was at stage 5 chronic renal failure, requiring dialysis treatment. Your husband's renal failure is at stage 5. It's terminal, but it doesn't immediately threaten his life. We can maintain his current condition with dialysis treatments. I couldn't believe what the doctor was telling me. End-stage chronic kidney failure? Stage 5? Repeating these words in my mind made everything else go blank. I couldn't take in anything else the doctor was saying. He will need to visit 4 times a week, each session lasting 4 hours for hemodialysis. If there's no improvement, we'll proceed with peritoneal dialysis, requiring hospitalization. In that case, he will undergo APD during night sleep at least once a month. Or CAPD during the day 4 to 6 times. Doctor, will Scott's condition improve with this treatment? As I listened, it sounded more like symptom management rather than a complete recovery. I asked for clarification, and the doctor's expression darkened. Honestly, think of it as a lifelong condition rather than something that will recover. A donor transplant would ideally be necessary to lead a life as freely as before. However, finding a donor is not easy. What we doctors can do is prevent his condition from worsening. We aim to allow him to spend his daily life with his family. That's terrible. Hearing this was a shock, but having it clearly stated made it difficult to accept. Scott, listening next to me, seemed even more shocked, his face downturned, silent. We went home silently that day, with dialysis treatment starting tomorrow. Scott, are you okay? Back home, Scott continued to be silent. Concerned, I approached him as he sat on the living room sofa. And he started laughing hysterically, as if he had lost his mind. Me, with end-stage renal failure. It's laughable. Why do I have to go through this? Just as he was laughing, the next moment, he threw the TV remote at me from the table. Surprised, I let out a small scream. And instinctively covered my face with my hands to dodge the attack. This is all because I married someone like you. How can you say that? The diagnosis had clearly shaken Scott the most. Yet, that didn't mean his words didn't hurt me. I am human too. Though I had considered divorcing him, I had never once wished he would just disappear. However, I couldn't forgive Scott for so easily throwing such hurtful words at me. Deeply wounding me from the bottom of my heart. You've ruined my life. Not only can you not bear children, but you also don't function as a woman should. Plus, you bring this inexplicable disease like a plague. Marrying you has ruined my life. Illness erodes a person's heart. That was clear from Scott's words. There had always been hints of his abusive nature, but he had never gone this far before. If only you weren't here. If only I hadn't married you. Despite his repeated accusations, for some reason, he hugged me tightly. Initially, I was confused. However, he must be suffering too. His arms trembled as he held me. Probably, being outwardly pleasant, he had no one else but me to lash out at. At that moment, I felt I was the only one who could bear his hardships. So I decided to endure whatever was said and support him. It would be okay to wait until his illness stabilized. Divorce could happen at any time. For now, I would support him to my limits. With that thought, I embarked on a challenging period of caregiving. However, a month later, I realized that was a mistake. Megan, let's get a divorce. We were having dinner together when Scott suddenly declared his intention to divorce. Confused, the movement of my fork halted as I was about to eat. Unaware of my state, he continued to eat his meal as if nothing was amiss. What? What are you saying all of a sudden? What did you just say? Didn't you hear? Let me say it again then. Divorce me. We can't continue as husband and wife. It wasn't just my imagination. Scott was indeed proposing divorce. But why so suddenly? I had no memory of doing anything that would lead to a divorce. Stunned by the incomprehensible situation, Scott sighed impatiently. I'm just fed up with being with you. Just seeing your face stresses me out, and it seems like my condition is worsening. That's terrible. Why divorce? Haven't I been supporting you earnestly all this time? Supporting earnestly? Hearing my words, Scott scoffed and uttered unbelievable words. Your fault I got sick, and we can't have children. You've dragged me into this pit of misery, and you talk about support? Don't make me laugh. Scott slammed down his fork roughly and spoke in an irritated tone. His attitude and the way he spoke pushed even me, usually so patient, to my limit. Why are you blaming everything on me? It's not like I caused your illness or the fact we can't have children. Are you saying it's my fault? Scott must be overwhelmed by his illness. He probably didn't even remember that we went for the tests together. Cutting off my words, he blamed me without giving me a chance to respond. If we had children, I could have had hope to live. Without such a motivating presence, my life with you is utterly bleak. That's why, divorce me. I can't continue with you. Understood. After hearing this, I couldn't muster even the slightest desire to support him. I had thought to wait until his illness improved a bit. That time was wasted. To him, I was nothing but a harbinger of disaster. Feeling this painfully, I accepted his request. Thus, our divorce was decided. I would leave the house within the week. While Scott was at the hospital, I started preparing, visiting the city court to get the divorce papers. During this, I ran into Gina Manning, a mutual friend, at the city court counter. She was there to assist me. Megan? What's going on? Did something happen? Gina Manning, who had also attended the wedding, was quite surprised to see me picking up the divorce papers. As soon as Gina gently spoke to me, all the emotions I had been holding back burst forth. And I burst into tears inside the city court. The staff, noticing my distress, instructed Gina to take care of me and guided me to a reception room. Sorry, Gina. I couldn't hold it in. It's okay, don't worry about that. More importantly, what happened? If you're okay with it, tell me. Honestly, I didn't know her very well. I met her through Scott and we had seen each other a few times. However, every time we met, she took good care of me like a caring older sister. She was a warm person. Actually, I seriously debated whether to tell her everything. She was a friend of Scott's. If I spoke carelessly, it might get back to him. But I felt genuine concern in her eyes. I was overwhelmed by her gaze and confessed everything. Then, Gina's body shook with anger, and she gently held my hand. "You've endured a lot, Megan." Huh? As soon as she heard about the process leading to the divorce, Gina seemed to make a decision, looked at me intently, and revealed some shocking truths. The content made me regret how devotedly I had acted. "Megan, I'll help too. Let's really make him pay." "Are you sure? You are Scott's friend, after all." "He's no friend. How can I stand by someone who disregards a wife who supports him like this? I can't justify his actions." Her reassuring words filled me with joy. "I'll support you fully." "So, Megan, let's corner him thoroughly." "Yes." Thus, I decided with Gina to take revenge on Scott. That night, after he returned from the hospital, we confirmed the divorce papers together. Finally, everything was packed, and I was ready to leave the next day. Finally saying, "Goodbye." Huh? It's refreshing. I won't have to see your worthless face anymore. That's good. I hope this makes you happier. Despite Scott's taunting words, I responded with a calm smile and gentle tone. He might have felt something was off, but he did not pursue it. Instead, he seemed to have some big news for me, giving me a meaningful smile. "Man, it seems like my luck started to turn around once we decided to divorce. I found a donor today," the doctor told me at the hospital. Understanding the reason behind his meaningful smile, I feigned a smile and congratulated him on finding a donor. "That's great. I'm glad a donor was found for you. Now my life is going to be rosy." "Oh, there's one more important thing." "Oh? What is it?" Scott, grinning as if he were leading up to the main point, waited as I pretended not to notice and responded with a puzzled look. Then, he laughed mockingly and delivered a shocking statement. "Now that the divorce is settled, I have no use for you anymore. So disappear, you infertile defect. I'm going to demand compensation too. Marrying you has brought me nothing but misery. It's only fair, right?" I was inwardly dismayed by Scott's unbelievable words. He really must think I am unaware of everything here. Little does he know, he's the one who's oblivious. While inwardly mocking Scott's foolishness, I simply agreed to his words. "Understood," I replied briefly, and the next morning, after submitting the divorce papers at the city court, I left the house. That evening, I met up with Gina after work and went to my new home. "Is this about enough for unpacking?" "Yes. Thank you so much. I didn't expect you'd even come to help." "What are you talking about?" "This is the least I can do." Despite probably being tired from work, she had brought friends to help with my move. Gina, well-liked and fortunate with friends, had many people willing to help a stranger like me move. By the way, hasn't someone's phone been ringing nonstop? Isn't it Megan's? I think I've been hearing vibrations from her bag. Prompted by their words, I quickly grabbed my phone and saw 27 missed calls. All were from Scott. Did he finally notice? Calling now is pointless. As Gina and I exchanged knowing smiles, Scott called again. "Answer it. I'm curious to see how he reacts. Put it on speaker." Gina was clearly enjoying the situation. Following her suggestion, I put the call on speaker, and a frantic Scott came on the line. "Megan. What have you done? You won't get away with this nonsense. Scott immediately started with rough words. Hearing his tone, the men paused their work to listen to our conversation. What are you talking about? I don't understand unless you explain. Don't play dumb. You canceled my donor, didn't you? The conversation took a turn exactly as I had anticipated, almost making me laugh out loud. It turns out that the donor Scott had been talking about was me. I went to the hospital this morning and explained the situation to the doctor. I had revealed that I was supposed to be the donor, but I declined to donate due to our divorce. Since we're no longer spouses, it only makes sense, right? Don't mess around. You've already agreed to donate once. Just give me your kidney quietly. Oh, dear. How barbaric. I don't have an organ for such a savage. You'll just have to continue treatment until a new donor appears. Scott began to yell and scream as if showing his true nature. When I spoke in a manner that further agitated his emotions, it seemed to make him even angrier, and he continued losing his composure. You're not getting away with this for free. Including your refusal to donate. I'm going to demand double the compensation in compensation. That's futile. What? He must have thought he could coerce me into donating by threatening me with money. But such tactics won't work for me. Because I am well prepared to corner him. Since you mentioned suing for compensation, I've gone ahead and hired a lawyer myself. So what? You think you can win against me with that? Don't you get it? I didn't hire a lawyer to protect myself. It's to sue you for compensation in return. What? At my sudden revelation, Scott let out an incredulous sound. To his surprise, I disclosed a shocking fact. You had an affair while we were married, didn't you? What? Scott visibly shook upon hearing about the affair. He had indeed started the affair just before his illness was diagnosed. And had been fooling around since. Gina had witnessed Scott entering a hotel with another woman and was shocked by who it was. I never thought you'd get back together with your ex-girlfriend from high school. You told me you had cut all ties and didn't even keep her contact info, didn't you? The mistress was Ashley Brown, Scott's ex-girlfriend from high school. I knew her too. Ashley works at the city courtal, right? Seems like she talks a lot about personal stuff to everyone. Thanks to that, I was able to gather information quickly. I found out about your secret meetings and that she's pregnant. Scott choked on his words upon hearing about the child. Confirming the accuracy of the information. You brought up divorce because you got Ashley pregnant, right? Probably, she threatened to ruin your life by spreading this to our friends. And even to me if you didn't divorce me. Ashley was Scott's first girlfriend. They broke up because of her cheating. However, she always held a special place for Scott. Though I was aware of this, I never thought they would get back together. So I felt secure. I never expected you to reconnect with her. But it must have been just right for you, huh? Since we didn't have children, and Ashley was your type of woman. That's why you decided to dump me and asked for a divorce. Having seen through everything, Scott was at a loss for words. Ashley had been bragging about their affair at her workplace. Gina, who had heard this, was convinced they were dating. When Gina tried to tell me about it, we reunited at the city court. She became my ally because she knew all the circumstances. So, you were going to demand compensation from me because I couldn't have children. But it turns out you're the one who will suffer. I'm fully prepared to fight you on this. But, it was actually your fault. Ashley and I could have a child. But no matter how much we tried, you and I couldn't. This proves I'm not the one to blame. Scott, clearly panicking. made statements that further proved his affair and that he had impregnated Ashley. Turning to Gina, I was grateful she had recorded everything, providing new evidence. The men around us also listened as witnesses, trapping Scott in a situation he couldn't talk his way out of. Remember when we went for a fertility test together? Huh? I don't remember taking any. Oh. As I brought up the topic, Scott seemed to finally remember. He exclaimed as I was about to reveal surprising results. About the test results, it turns out I'm not the one with the issue. Huh? Confused, Scott made a puzzled sound over the phone. The test showed that the infertility issue is with you, Scott. You're the one without viable sperm. The fact that Scott was infertile left him speechless. While I could hear frantic noises on his end, I prepared to show him the evidence. If you don't believe it, I'll show you on a video call. Look at your phone screen. As I said this, I kept the call on speaker and turned on the camera. Scott's call also switched to video mode. And the moment I showed him the official results from the hospital, a high-pitched female voice came from his side. Wait. Scott, listen to me. Ashley was there next to him, trying to grab his phone. Ashley, what the hell is this? Explain. Scott, fuming with anger, glared at her as she frantically tried to deflect the blame onto me. It's not like that. This? Don't lie. There's no way Scott could be infertile. The unexpected situation was thrilling. Almost like something out of a daytime drama, and the men around us were intrigued. Amidst the chaos, Gina Manning suddenly appeared on the call screen. Oh, look, it's Ashley. What are you doing there? I thought you had a date with that handsome entrepreneur today. Gina. Both seemed surprised to see Gina on the screen, and their reactions were amusing. Gina continued with a smirk. You're always bragging about men at work. But I had no idea you were also messing with Scott. How many guys have you snagged this month? You love to brag about it at work, don't you? Stop it, Gina. Don't say such ridiculous things. Ashley turned pale at Gina's unexpected revelation. Hearing this, Scott trembled with anger and shouted. What's this all about, Ashley? Whose child is it? It's obviously yours, Scott. Gina is just spouting nonsense. Are you going to believe her over me? I'm getting such harsh treatment. Why would you think I'm lying? If you want to label me a liar, how will you explain away this recording? Care to enlighten me? Gina, finding amusement in the escalating conflict, began to play a damning audio recording. Ashley, what are you going to do about the baby? Isn't the businessman refusing to acknowledge it? The recording, made in the city court break room by Gina, captured a conversation between Ashley and several female colleagues.
Yeah.
But I really don't want to raise it alone. There's this guy who's totally into me right now, so I was thinking of pinning it on him. You're up to no good again. How are you planning to pin it on him? Ashley's shocking reply came without hesitation. I was planning to milk him as a sugar daddy. But turns out he's trying to divorce his wife. He's an ex from high school, Scott Hansen, and he seems likely to cave easily to pressure. So, I'm going to threaten him with the child to push the divorce through. Then have him remarry me and take care of the kid. Ashley's audacious strategy left her colleagues in disbelief. I don't actually like kids, nor do I want to raise them. But his mom has been nagging him about wanting to see a grandchild, and she's keen on helping out. So, why not leave the kid for my husband and his mom to look after while I enjoy myself outside? Everyone's happy, except his wife, of course. That's wicked. The guy who fell for such a wicked woman just ran out of luck, huh? Poor Scott. The female colleagues laughed, seemingly amused by the situation as outsiders. Scott, hearing this, was seething with rage, while I was aghast at the unfolding drama. It's not. I mean, don't give me excuses. With this evidence out, how do you plan to wriggle out of this, huh? Scott seemed ready to confront Ashley physically, which alarmed me enough to interrupt their heated argument and declare my stance to Scott. That's how it is. A lawyer will probably be visiting you soon. Let's discuss this through the lawyer from now on. Wait, Megan. Let's talk, just once. I was deceived by this woman too. I'm a victim here. Without her, we could have fixed things. Please, give me a chance to talk. Are you saying you'll dump me? Isn't that cruel? Didn't you say I was more important to you than she was? Caught in such an unbelievable real-life drama, I felt disgusted and tired of the mess. As if I'd give you that chance. You can handle the rest on your own. After all, I'm no longer your wife or anything to you. I couldn't help but sigh. What was it about this man that had once caught my eye? Now, I regretted not just the marriage but even dating him in the first place. His words no longer had any impact on my heart. Please, don't say that. Just give me one more chance. Let's start over. You said you were deceived, but that's my line. All this time you've mocked and belittled others. Do you have any idea how I felt staying by your side these past 5 years? That's. Struck where it hurt, Scott had no reply. Either you nor Ashley intend to forgive you. I'll socially and legally corner you and show you hell. Be prepared. With those words, I ended the call. Soon after, lawyers arrived, and without any physical altercation, they began discussing compensation. Thus, my conflict with Scott came to an end. Since then, I've demanded a significant amount in compensation from Scott and Ashley. Despite his declarations of hiring a lawyer, he had not managed to save a penny. He thought that by threatening me, I would weaken and agree to help him. He admitted as much in his testimony. As for the compensation, Scott, who earned a meager salary, quickly exhausted his savings and is now chased by monthly payments. Ashley also broke up and, having no money to maintain her home, had to return to her parents' house where she was met with outrage and not allowed inside. Thanks to this, Scott found work in a factory in the countryside and is diligently repaying his debt. Actually, the strong men that Gina brought with her were Scott's seniors from his hometown. And they have promised to manage his repayments to ensure he doesn't escape his debt. Thanks to this arrangement, his payments are proceeding without issue. Meanwhile, Ashley was fired from her government job due to her scandalous behavior, and is now repaying her debt to me by working in the nightlife industry and taking part-time jobs during the day. After being abandoned by Scott, she is walking a lonely path. Unsure she could raise a child on her own, she opted for a foster care system. In this way, I have managed to settle my long-standing grudges. Since then, Gina and I have become good friends and often go out together. I have a nice senior colleague. I think you'd get along with him, Megan. But I'm already at this age. Don't be silly. A woman should always be in love. Forget that trash and move forward. Despite being forcefully invited to drink, spending time with Gina makes every day enjoyable. She won't let me spend a single lonely moment and has included me in her circle. Thanks to her kind consideration and warmth, my emotional wounds are gradually healing. Now, I'm even dating a man she introduced to me. If you two ever have a child, let me hold it second.
Ah.
That's not fair. I'm the second. Huh? I've known her longer than you, so I should be first. No way. Absolutely not. Watching the friendly banter between these two, I vow to protect this happiness.
I'm so glad you were born safe and sound. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything.
That's not true at all. Just having you here is enough for me. Now let's be happy together.
I felt extremely nauseous at her words, but I couldn't just leave like this. I finally reached for the door. I knocked lightly and opened it.
Hey, who do you think is the father of this child?
As I entered the hospital room, I reacted to Abby's words and looked up.
Huh? Who could it be? Someone we know. Right, Kate?
Nathan hurriedly interrupted our conversation with these words. Somehow both the imperious Abby and the flustered Nathan seemed ridiculous, and I spat out in disgust. Of course I know. Congratulations, I hope you're happy. Make that child happy together. Then I left Nathan behind and exited the hospital room. Surely divine retribution will fall upon them both. There's no future where they become happy after causing misery to others. I headed to a place to prepare a new future for them. My name is Kate Reynolds. I am a 37-year-old housewife. I was born and raised in a rural area. I have one younger sister. I grew up happily as the eldest daughter in a very ordinary family. After graduating from high school, I worked as an office worker at a local company. Not flashy, but I spent my days happily and seriously. And in the course of work, I was introduced to Nathan Reynolds, who would become my husband. Nathan was the son of the president of a client company. 3 years older than me, he seemed too good for someone like me. The executive who introduced me to Nathan told his father, the president,
Miss Kate is serious and precise in her work, and she's well liked by our clients for her kindness. If the executive who never praises anyone says so, she must be a wonderful lady.
My father-in-law Jason liked me from our first meeting, and so did Nathan, who came to like me, leading us to date and marry when I was 33 years old. I then retired from work to become a housewife. Everyone blessed me for this new beginning. However, there was one person who did not, my sister Abby. Abby is 10 years younger than me. My younger sister was the long-awaited second child, born after my mom underwent fertility treatments. Because of this, she was clearly loved and spoiled by our family. Of course, I also found Abby incredibly cute.
I want to eat pudding.
That's for your sister. You had some yesterday, didn't you?
It's okay. Let her have it. Thus, I often indulged her little whims from an early age. Consequently, Abby grew up to be the opposite of me, a skilled complainer, clearly expressing her opinions, both good and bad.
I hate hand-me-downs. They're ugly and I don't want to wear them.
In elementary school, she would refuse to wear the clothes I had outgrown, troubling our mother. Our family was not very wealthy, even by general standards. Even though I only wore hand-me-downs, I never complained, regardless of whether I liked them or not. Not that I thought Abby shouldn't complain, because I didn't, but learning to endure was also important, I believed. It's not ugly. Sure, it's a bit outdated, but the design is still wearable today. If I ever talked back, Abby would retort,
You don't realize it's ugly because you're out of style.
Indeed, I might not have been fashionable, but I treasured the new clothes I occasionally received, and my mother kept them clean and neat. Since I wasn't into flashy styles, my clothes were mostly basic items from unfashionable brands. I thought Abby could wear them just fine, but probably she just disliked the idea of wearing my hand-me-downs. Still, as sisters connected by blood, our tastes unknowingly seemed to align, as the things Abby would buy were often the same type and color as what I owned. Yet, because of Abby's cuteness, my parents and I ended up spoiling her. As she became a high school student, her whims became more and more unreasonable. She would demand pocket money, and if she wanted something, whether it was makeup or bags, she would buy it without hesitation. Every school was skipped if she didn't feel like attending, and she would go out at night whenever she wanted to play. By this time, not only did my parents indulge her, but they also scolded her on several occasions. We had to search for Abby in the middle of the night more than once or twice. Even if my parents refused to give her pocket money, she would sneak to our grandparents' house and coax some out of them unknowingly. No matter how much they lectured her or restricted her actions, Abby, who had always lived freely since childhood, did not change her ways.
It's my fault for spoiling Abby. What if she ends up dropping out due to truancy?
My mother felt responsible for Abby's actions, but Abby managed to graduate from high school and even secured a job.
We were all relieved, but astonishingly, she quit the company after just 1 month.
There's a stinky old man there,
she said, offering a reason that hardly justified quitting. Afterward, she bounced between part-time jobs, quitting and starting new ones until she turned 23. Now an adult, Abby has settled down a bit in the past 2 years, working steadily as a part-timer. Perhaps she has learned a bit about personal responsibility as an adult. However, when I announced my marriage, she suddenly expressed a desire to quit her job.
Isn't it fair that only you get to marry the son of a president and become a housewife?
Ugh, I'm so jealous. That was Abby's first reaction when I shared the news of my marriage. Even as a housewife, I still have to do housework, and I plan to do simple company tasks at home without pay. Even when I explained this, the mere idea of quitting her job seemed to fill Abby with envy.
Housework is done quickly, and company work only takes a few minutes, right?
Even so, I can't just slack off.
That's right, and with your father-in-law being the company president, dealing with relatives must be tough, right? It seems like you'll hardly have any time to rest.
Mother took my side, but Abby wasn't convinced.
That's just enduring until my in-laws are gone. Jason is old anyway, and in a few years, you'll be president's wife, right?
What are you saying? I was severely displeased by Abby's words. Sensing my annoyance, Abby laughed loudly and said,
Just kidding.
But I wasn't in the mood to laugh, and my parents were also stunned by her remark. Everyone thought it was too much of a joke, but after a while, Abby actually quit her job.
I quit my job, so from tomorrow, I'll do the housework. Housewife.
She never even helped with chores at home, and now her sudden declaration had us all in a whirl. I was planning to get married and move out in a few months, but I felt terribly sorry for my parents, who would have to live with Abby. I can't believe she actually quit her job. When I lamented, my parents just gave a wry smile.
I thought she had calmed down, but Abby is still a child at heart. It's okay for now, but what is she planning to do as she gets older without a steady job?
Even if it's about personal responsibility, the parents must be worried.
Well, I just hope Abby doesn't cause trouble for Kate. Right, you mustn't let Abby disturb your happiness.
In the end, I got married and left home without being able to do anything about the eager housewife Abby had become. Consequently, I was constantly worried about my family after my marriage. My in-laws were kind, and there was no inconvenience in our life, but as expected, being a housewife was challenging, with duties extending beyond household chores to preparing gifts for business associates and dealing with relatives. Although we lived separately, my mother-in-law Molly would often come to teach me how to manage our home, saying,
It must be hard marrying into such a family,
showing concern for me. No.
I understand it's hard because I went through it too, but let's take it easy and not push ourselves too hard. If we try too hard, we'll run out of breath.
With a smile, Molly taught me various things. There's a lot expected from me being their daughter-in-law, including interactions with my in-laws. Some friends said, It sounds tough, but Molly always cared for me and even prepared meals while I was busy learning the ropes. I was deeply moved by how fortunate I was to have such wonderful in-laws.
Both Dad and Mom are really happy that you became my wife.
Nathan also said that. Slowly I was becoming integrated into the family as a daughter-in-law. And 2 years after our marriage, I became pregnant with our first child. My in-laws were overjoyed. Nathan also seemed to look forward to the child's birth. However, contrary to this happiness, I had some concerns. It was about Nathan's suspicious behavior. He started taking his smartphone to the bathroom and had increasingly frequent visits entertaining, and recently the time he spent with me had decreased. Noticing that he was home less often, I became worried about his fatigue and once mentioned, You seem busy lately.
I'll be president soon. The constant calls and appointments are troubling.
However, Nathan responded as I expected and went back to his smartphone. Since becoming pregnant, I gradually felt more anxious about not having Nathan around. One day I suddenly thought that Nathan might be cheating. It happened when I looked at Nathan, who was always on his smartphone. His face seemed too happy for our work call. I felt uneasy seeing that expression.
I got a sudden call. I have to go out.
Sure enough, right after that expression, Nathan spoke to me. What? Now?
That president always calls suddenly. You can go to sleep.
Leaving these words behind, Nathan rushed out of the house. I thought it was unbelievable. What kind of emergency could there be at this hour? Waking up to the reality of a husband leaving his pregnant wife alone at night, I decided to hire a detective for the sake of our unborn child. A while after that, I received a call from my parents.
Abby has been taken to the hospital. Come quickly.
I was shocked by the call. Abby had been taken to the gynecology department, so I rushed to the hospital, thinking she might have an ovarian torsion. Is Abby's examination over? Is she okay? At the hospital, I found my parents in the waiting room and approached them.
Turns out she's pregnant. She's starting to go into labor.
What? I couldn't help but raise my voice at my mother's words. Didn't you notice before?
It seems Abby had regular checkups, but we didn't hear anything. I didn't notice much since I didn't show much during pregnancy either, and neither did Abby.
I instinctively touched my own stomach. Certainly, I'm not the type whose pregnancy is noticeable, but is it possible for one to go unnoticed by others until the due month? It's too late to say anything now, but soon after I heard the healthy cry of a newborn. My relief was short-lived as a new problem emerged: how to raise the child. Abby, an unmarried self-proclaimed housewife who isn't working, and the identity of the father was unknown. However, it wasn't the time to bring up such matters just after Abby had given birth. So after seeing the newborn's face, I went home. Abby had a baby. I told this to Nathan when I got home.
Is that so? Abby is a mom now?
Nathan seemed surprised, but smiled happily.
Can I go see them?
How about we go together this weekend? I only saw the baby's face today, so I'm planning to visit again properly.
That sounds good. I'll try to adjust my work schedule.
Nathan said this and immediately started fiddling with his smartphone. All his talk about adjusting work seemed like a lie, but I hoped that seeing Abby's child might bring about a change in him. That weekend, Nathan and I headed to the hospital where Abby was admitted. Just as we were about to enter the hospital, my phone rang. It was from the detective agency. It wasn't good to answer the phone while Nathan was with me. I hesitated for a moment, and Nathan spoke up.
Is that a call? Can I go ahead?
He seemed eager to see the baby, and I felt relieved. Yeah, I think the call will be quick, so I'll follow you soon. After saying this, I parted with Nathan and answered the phone. The call ended, and I headed to the hospital room with a heavy heart. Then, I heard voices from inside.
I'm so glad you were born safe and sound. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything.
That's not true at all. Just having you here is enough for me. Let's win happiness together.
Having just had that phone call, her words made me feel extremely nauseous. But I couldn't just leave like that. Bracing myself, I touched the door, knocked lightly, and opened it. Abby, how are you feeling?
And big sister, you came.
Of course. Nathan was holding the baby and looked happy.
I had a baby first, huh? He's healthy and cute, right? I wonder what your child will be like.
Indeed. Abby seemed to want to boast. I was annoyed by her tone, but responded briefly to avoid provocation. Then, perhaps frustrated that I didn't react poorly, Abby spoke more forcefully.
Hey, who do you think is the father of this child?
I reacted to her words and looked up.
Huh? Who could it be? Someone we know? Right, Kate?
Nathan hurriedly joined our conversation. Somehow, both Abby's bossiness and Nathan's fluster seemed ridiculous, and I spat out in disgust. Of course I know. Congratulations, be happy. Make sure you both make that child happy.
Kate?
I'm going home now.
You're leaving already? Wait.
As Nathan hurriedly placed the baby back on the bed and tried to follow me, Abby stopped him.
Well, if you already knew, then that's quick. Good for you, Nathan.
I am?
Nathan fumbled, held back by Abby's grip on his shoulders. Leaving him behind, I left the hospital room and headed straight to the detective agency. The call had been to inform me that they had gathered evidence. The detective hesitantly told me something even harder to say.
Actually, we've seen a woman who is familiar with the obstetrics clinic, located around 10 minutes west of your home, attending appointments with Nathan.
It was indeed the clinic where Abby had given birth. Although I had suspected, given Abby's history of coveting what was mine, the recent conversation confirmed it. Without a doubt, Nathan had been having an affair with Abby. After receiving the evidence from the detective office, I went to my in-laws' house. Nathan has had a child.
Had a child? What do you mean? It's not time for our grandchild to be born, right?
My in-laws looked puzzled by my words. Yes, it's not my child. Please look at this. I presented the evidence received from the detective office. As my in-laws examined it, their faces gradually paled. After realizing everything, they were apologetic.
I can't believe this is happening.
She was crying, almost banging her head on the floor. Mother, please lift your head. I'm not asking for an apology from you two, but I cannot forgive Nathan. I think I will be filing for divorce.
That's understandable. A wonderful woman like you should not be saddened, and honestly, we cannot forgive him either. We're truly sorry. We will do whatever we can to help you.
Thank you. I felt profoundly grateful that my in-laws were understanding. The divorce seemed likely to proceed smoothly. After our conversation, their anger was directed towards Nathan.
What was Nathan thinking? Doing something like this? I'm going to call him right now.
As Jason said this, he immediately started dialing Nathan's number. The moment the call connected, he shouted angrily.
I've heard everything from Abby. What is this all about? Come here and explain yourself. It's a misunderstanding. Listen to me.
Nathan sounded frantic on the other end of the phone. His voice leaked from the smartphone in such a pathetic way that I couldn't help but smirk, though my in-laws were not amused.
All right, I'll hear everything, but come here quickly. I'm sorry, I'll come right away.
His voice sounded almost tearful, like a child being scolded. Imagining his expression, I chuckled to myself. Not wanting to face Nathan, I went home after that. Once home, I immediately began packing. The house was a wedding gift from Jason, and Molly had furnished it for me. I was getting divorced and moving out, but I didn't want Abby to take over the gifts from my in-laws. When I shared my feelings with them, they said,
Of course, we gave you that house and furniture because they were for you, Kate.
But I understand if you don't want to live there. I have an apartment closer to the station. You should move there for now.
Thank you. With the help of my in-laws, I quickly arranged for a moving company and relocated. It seemed Nathan was being forced to reflect on his actions at his parents' home and wasn't allowed to go to work. Molly kept me updated on his situation. About a week later, I finally received a call from Nathan.
Kate, I finally got a chance to call. Mom took away my smartphone. What do you mean by getting a divorce?
What do you mean, what? You have a child with another woman. How can we possibly continue our marriage?
It was just a fling with Abby. I didn't think she would get pregnant. Anyway, I'm on my way home now. Let's talk. Please, don't leave. Stay there.
Nathan hurriedly hung up after speaking, but I laughed to myself. I had already moved out. Which home was he heading to? Predictably, I received another call from Nathan a few minutes later.
What's going on? Why is there no house?
I couldn't help but laugh at his bewildered voice. I've already sold the house. And the new owner plans to turn it into a parking lot.
How can you just do that? That house is in my father's name.
Of course, I got permission. That day when you came home, I also disposed of your belongings. So your house doesn't exist anymore. Just go back to your parents' house. After my move, Jason sold the house. I was grateful to him for going to such lengths. And as I told Nathan, the new owner was indeed planning to turn the site into a parking lot, and the house had been demolished a few days later. I even went to see it. I thought I might feel a bit sad, but watching the house being torn down felt cleansing.
So, can we really never go back?
He must have been standing on the now empty lot. His voice was weak and desperate. He was such a bad finisher, always pleading. If he regretted it so much, he shouldn't have cheated me in the first place. Stop being so persistent. Just reflect on it at your parents' home. Nathan probably ran away from his parents' scolding, but now he had nowhere else to find peace. He had destroyed that himself. That night, my parents also contacted me.
Abby is saying that Nathan is the father of her baby. That must be a mistake, right?
Apparently, Abby had been claiming this since her discharge from the hospital, but my parents had ignored it, thinking it impossible. However, since she hadn't stopped insisting for several days, my mother, now seriously doubting, contacted me. I'm sorry to ask this, but it's true. I'm planning to divorce Nathan.
Oh, that's terrible.
I've informed Nathan's parents and they're helping me prepare a new place. We're going to discuss the divorce. My mother seemed to be crying on the other side of the phone. Abby was apologizing repeatedly, and I felt tears welling up as well. My mother had no reason to apologize. It was Abby's actions that she felt responsible for. Despite being an adult, Abby probably can't imagine that her actions are causing sadness to those around her. Mother, don't worry about anything. After reassuring my parents, I ended the call. Then, with my in-laws present, I began the divorce discussions.
It was my fault. I got carried away by Abby's temptation.
Nathan seemed reluctant to divorce, apologizing repeatedly, but his words did not move me. If you feel sorry, will you marry Abby?
But
she's had the baby. Abby can't raise it alone. Take responsibility. Nathan was silenced by my words. Jason sighed deeply.
We will support Kate and the child that's been born. You take responsibility and fulfill your duties to Kate's sister and the child.
Under pressure from both me and his father, Nathan reluctantly signed the divorce papers. I hoped he would reflect on how his actions had led to this outcome. After our divorce, Nathan remarried Abby and started living with his parents. Having no house left, he had no choice but to live with them. By the time I was nearing the end of my pregnancy, I was living comfortably in the home prepared by my in-laws.
Sorry for stealing Nathan from you.
Abby sent me that message, but I ignored it. Dealing with Abby now could stress me out, which would be bad for my health. But probably that's exactly what she wanted.
Guess what kind of kid your sister will have? It's funny because they will be cousins, but almost like siblings. Well, I'm younger and prettier, so my child will surely be better.
She kept sending messages like this, completely disregarding others' feelings.
By the way, I haven't received a baby gift from you.
Even more so, she had the nerve to say that to me, knowing I was going to be a single mother, which really got on my nerves. Are you home right now? I'll come over right away. Despite having ignored her until now, I replied to her message about the baby gift and headed to Nathan's house right away. Kate, how are you feeling? Molly had continued to care for me warmly even after the divorce. She welcomed me warmly into the house that day. Is Abby here?
Nathan is off today too, so they're probably here.
Molly hesitated a bit, careful with her words. I smiled and said, Great, I brought a baby gift for Abby and Nathan. Once inside, I sat in the living room while Molly called Abby over. Abby, holding the baby and looking blissful, laughed at me mockingly, unaware that she was about to be cast down into turmoil.
You finally brought the baby gift. Well, I'm not short on money.
To Abby, who had made such a remark, I handed a thick envelope. It was bulky, but something you'd expect to contain cash, making Abby frown in confusion.
What is this?
I wasn't going to give this, but this is my gift to you. As I gently handed the baby to Nathan and passed the envelope to her, Abby's face turned pale as she looked through the papers and sighed.
What is this? What does this mean?
She then screamed loudly, glaring at Nathan. Nathan peered curiously at the documents Abby was holding, and turned pale as well.
I don't know anything about this. It wasn't me.
It's obviously you, Nathan.
I couldn't help but smile at their exchange. The envelope actually contained investigation documents from a detective. I had shown them to my in-laws already, but they contained shocking truths unknown to Abby. It turned out that Nathan's affairs weren't just with Abby. He had 4 mistresses in total. Abby was the third in line. The first affair appears to have been a double affair with a subordinate's wife, whom Nathan was seriously involved with. According to Molly, the husband eventually found out, and the marriage to Abby was the catalyst that finally ended it. The second was a 20-year-old girl he met on an app, not Abby. He was seen entering the obstetrics clinic with her, apparently for an abortion, according to the detective. The third was Abby. The fourth was one of Abby's friends, who she had introduced to Nathan. I knew all this, but to me, Nathan was now a stranger. Having any relationship with multiple women was bad enough, but involving my sister made it unforgivable. I would have buried this dark secret if Abby had sincerely apologized and refrained from trying to one-up me. However, since she couldn't stop, I decided to knock her off her pedestal.
This is terrible. You liar!
As expected, Abby began crying and lashing out in hysterics. Despite holding her adorable child, she repeatedly cursed and lunged at Nathan.
What is all this noise about?
Just then, Jason returned home. He seemed a bit pleased to see me and said,
Kate, you're here.
Then he glared at Abby and Nathan.
What are you two doing shouting in front of the baby?
Jason, listen, Nathan has...
Oh, if it's about Nathan, they both already know everything you're going to say. I grinned at the panicking Abby.
That thing.
He spoke with a look of disbelief.
After all, Abby, it was before your marriage, and you're just the same. You were complicit in the affair, so do you even have the right to blame Nathan?
I think only Kate has the right to blame Nathan.
Abby bit her lip in frustration as her own parents didn't take her side.
Also, I've prepared a new house for the three of you to live in.
What?
Abby's eyes briefly lit up at the father-in-law's words, despite her furious state.
I negotiated the rent down to $800 a month. It's a friend's company, so they cut down $30 for us. Please move out quickly.
At those words, Abby's face fell into despair again.
Wait, what do you mean move out? And why do Kate get a new house, while we get a rental, with rent to pay? I've also prepared a new job for you. It's in sales at a real estate company.
A new job?
Are you kicking me out of the company? I was supposed to be the next president.
The couple then confronted the father-in-law, but he smiled and said,
When did I ever say you were going to be the next president? You just assumed that. Besides, I can't keep someone in the company who has affairs with employees' families. Pack your things quickly.
The couple who had been arguing now united in their protest against Jason. I watched in disbelief, but Molly murmured beside me,
Ever since Kate and Nathan divorced, the father planned to kick him out. Both the father and I think of Kate as our true family.
I was overjoyed by her words, and I silently laughed at the divine retribution my sister and her husband were facing. They moved into the house Jason had prepared for them. It was a 15-minute walk from the station. However, it was next to a pediatric clinic and only a 3-minute walk to the supermarket, ideal for raising children. My parents told me Abby was complaining about not being able to go out, but she would surely spend recklessly if given the chance. I hope she tries her best in parenting in the house Jason found for the sake of their grandchild. Nathan was under Abby's thumb, working uncomfortably in sales at a real estate company, which, ironically, was managed by a relative of the subordinate he had an affair with. Whether the company knows about Nathan's misconduct or not, he must feel quite constrained there. Moreover, with the compensation payments, Abby couldn't live the lavish life she desired. It was a life neither Abby nor Nathan could have imagined, but it was the situation they had brought upon themselves. Above all, I hope they make their child's happiness a priority. After that, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both my parents and in-laws adore him. Though my bond with my in-laws was severed, I still lived in that apartment, keeping in touch. I worked remotely for Jason's company, which had previously been unpaid. Now employed there, I earned enough to raise my child on my own. I might have been plain, but I've always valued people and acted with integrity, and I believe that's why I ended up where I am. Though I wasn't lucky with my husband, I was blessed with a very cute son. I am truly grateful for the opportunity to work from home while raising him.